Hi everyone, I'm Elena Danaan, and I'm tonight in the company of Michael Salla and Laura Eisenhower. All three together, we have different elements that we decide to bring together to understand better what happened in 1954 when agreements were signed with grey extraterrestrials on behalf of humanity. There's a lot of stories and legends and misconceptions about it, and we are going to try tonight to bring our elements to try to understand what may have really happened. So, Michael and Laura, good evening. How are you both?
Doing good. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. That's going to be interesting. So, let's start by Laura. You're the principal, more directly person involved because Dwight was your great grandfather, Dwight Eisenhower. And what could you tell about your feeling and your memory and the elements you have about that period, that exact period when all of this may have happened?
Yes. Well, I feel like Eisenhower was always trying to get my attention starting from childhood. And I was like trying to figure it out. I'm like, what's going on here? And I knew him as a family member, but I, started to realize, wow, all right, he was general in the Second World War and he was president. All right, this is somebody that everybody knows, or this is somebody who has influenced history. So I got really, really curious about our connection, about things that weren't revealed in this administration that just kind of synchronistically found me starting at the age of 9. I saw a Weekly World News article about Eisenhower meeting with the Greys, and it was a joke newspaper, sort of like The Onion. Nothing to be taken seriously, like Bat Boy is taking over New York City kind of articles, just kind of a joke newspaper. And it was on the shelves, and I remember looking at it when I was like a little kid and just being like, there's something more to this story. And with the transmissions that I was experiencing through him, I just started to dive into the research. When I was recruited to go off planet in 2006, it opened my eyes up to a lot of stuff that helped me to connect dots and helped me to sort of determine what aspects of my research were truth or disinformation. And when I was kind of following up with the curiosity, there was always this thing, the Greada Treaty. Eisenhower signed a treaty with the Greys, and some have even said, oh, your great grandfather sold us out to the ETs, sold us out to the Greys, and made this like grave decision, whether it was based in good intent and he was sabotaged and the treaty was broken, or it was fear-based because of the technologies and the telepathic sort of influence that these kind of beings have, or if maybe he really didn't sign the treaty and something else took place. So meeting you was very refreshing as far as what it validated, because aspects of my research pointed to the fact that Eisenhower did not sign the treaties, but a certain level called Blue Unit or something unit of the NSA were involved with it. And the dots that I've connected talking to you is, MJ12. So 3-letter organizations and levels of that even some of the people involved hadn't even heard of. Alex Collier actually talked about that, said that this was really kind of done behind his back, and you're the only other person that validated it, and you guys obviously have an incredible connection. And so what it appears to be, and what I've learned, is that the Greada Treaty took place 10 years before the Eisenhower administration, and it's connected to Aleister Crowley, Winston Churchill, and Adolf Hitler. And it involves sort of like this kind of black magic, and also an alliance with the Greys and the reptilian agenda starting from the Atlantean times, and that it's been in the works for a while. Even Phil Schneider and other whistleblowers have talked about governments and ETs being in connection with each other starting from the year like 1933. So when one does research on, the Greys and any kind of treaty, usually they just run into the 1954 Greada Treaty with Eisenhower, and there's a much, much deeper history. So if it started with, Churchill and Adolf Hitler and Aleister Crowley during the Roosevelt administration, what I discovered is we were already sold out. And a lot about Project Paperclip and a lot of the different secret space program levels and a lot of the different things that we're, discovering is that there's a ET negative alien agenda behind world wars, behind a lot of the stuff that took place in the transfer of power and whatever sort of history is described as, victory during the Second World War, which actually we didn't really win, because this treaty and this alliance ended up moving into our governments, but it goes beyond like just America. When we talk about like Project Paperclip, even, it's a global network connected to this darker alien agenda. And so I studied testimonies from people like Gerald Light and, people that said, oh yeah, no, Eisenhower signed the treaties, or he wanted to disclose things connected to the Nordics and he got shut down, and there's this influence with the Vatican. And, it's very, very hard to determine what the actual truth is, because there's a lot of differing opinions. So when you have whistleblower testimony of people that were there firsthand, one has to ask themselves, like, if there was something that went behind his back, how did this appear to others to have involved being able to claim that, Eisenhower made a deal? So as Michael has researched and brought a lot of light to, there was that first encounter with the Nordics and some sort of thing going on with the benevolent ET races, including Balthor and the Venusians later on, that put in place a sort of plan and a sort of positive military operation. Randy Kramer has talked about Project Moonshadow and a alliance with a positive ET group that he called the cancer fighters of the galaxy, right? So is that like something in connection to the Nordics and also Balthor, and as the greater Galactic Federation of Worlds have the Nordics and Balthor sort of in alliance with people on an Earth level like Eisenhower that could not maybe disclose this stuff, that, formed, some sort of, agreement that kind of supersedes or overrides, the Greada Treaty. So what I feel, and my conclusion, and I'll shut up in a minute, is that something did happen behind his back. And in light of that, the benevolent ETs and Eisenhower formulated something and created something, to offset it. Call it the white hats, call it, part of, this greater plan that people talk about. But I sometimes sense that this greater alliance with the benevolent ETs has a lot to do with the breeding programs that brought about the Essassani, and the gray hybrid breeding programs that have actually managed to heal that race so that they can assist us as a humanity and where we are currently. And a lot of that is coming to light, and a lot of people attribute Eisenhower for having something to do with working with the Greys to some capacity, in light of the fact that there were these undercurrents of betrayal and, sort of like going through the back door and doing things that he wasn't approving of. So in light of that, it seemed like a plan was put in place as sort of a compensation that I think people are confusing with him actually signing a treaty to, abduct humans. And I think he realized that, being a general in the Second World War wasn't just, a war on the battlegrounds of, humans and territory and ideologies or politics. There was something much deeper going on. And as we understand with the deep state and the cabal, is that they own both sides of war. They fund and, create these sort of scenarios that has a lot to do with, these treaties, basically slavery and bartering, and if we're allowed to take a certain amount of humans, we'll give you technology in exchange for it, is an underlying current that's been in the works for thousands of years. And I feel like, just like we're seeing in the administration that we just went through, and I don't really want to name names, but I think people know what I'm talking about, like with the tea guy, they can rewrite history, and they can literally target well-intentioned leaders and make them look like the bad guys. So I feel like very protective without wanting to be biased because he's a family member. Like, I'm trying to research from a place of neutrality, and take accountability, or like kind of figure it out and kind of, work it out through doing as much as I can in the disclosure community to reveal these truths. But I feel like he was used and taken advantage of. And, growing up in this family and really having a strong sense of the kind of person he is, just because he's like my spirit guide and he's always been with me. I feel it's just like, this is the most complicated, crazy like deal. And I'm like, what did I sign up for? Like, I get attacked all the time because of whatever he did or didn't do. Even yesterday, I mean, it almost like derailed me. It's just like, your great grandfather did this and this, all this blame, all this concentration of energy just all upon him. And it's like, we have to understand the shadow government. We have to understand the tactics of the cabal. We have to understand that they can literally rewrite history and target the good people. And when I was recruited to go off planet, they were playing the same kind of game. And I felt like I was breaking like a curse, like, like, you can't have me, you can't control me. And the tactics that they used was, oh, well, you're going to be in a leadership position, and this is an honor that you would be invited to go off planet and go to Mars. And in the times that we're in right now, it's like, I look back and I'm like, anything
glad you're not there
up against, but it was like I was breaking something. And the Mars recruitment had a lot to do with Alternative 3 and things that took place with some of these communications with off-world beings. And all I could do was just like, hold my sovereignty and do my research. But, I have to admit, I'm still trying to figure it out, and I'm kind of at a loss. And what you've told me, Elena, is that MJ12 did this behind his back. Alex talked about this level of the 3-letter organizations that were the main, people, that there might have been like a lower level, due to compartmentalization that involved him, but the deeper layers behind it were beyond him and his authority, and that there's much more power beyond the position of presidency. And that's why he warned us about the military industrial complex, that his position did not grant him the authority to maintain a level of control, and he lost control. And the whole question of ET and government treaties and the technologies and the secret space programs really just became something he couldn't manage or tackle. And so it's interesting, Randy Kramer's testimony, but he did want to invade Area 51 and get to the bottom of it. And he got really angry. He had 8 heart attacks. It's a lot for any of us to process. And I think, just being a general on a human level, like trying to, manage wartime, when the alien question came in, it's just like, what are we dealing with? So, well, I'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. Yes, Michael, what would you have? What would be your feedback on what Laura just said?
Yeah, I think it'd be good to give a little bit of background about what kind of power did Eisenhower really have. I mean, he's elected president in 1952 in November, and people assume, well, 5-star general, he becomes president, it's this all-powerful figure. Well, actually, he wasn't that all-powerful figure. He'd been out of the scene for a few years. He was the president of Columbia University, so he was completely outside of the loop for quite some time. And so he comes back in 1952, he's elected. In 1953, he gets a briefing. It's called the Eisenhower briefing document. And so he's brought up to speed with some of the issues that have been happening behind the scenes. And he's told about this group, the Majestic 12 group, that is running the show. And one of the principal figures that he appoints in his presidential team is Nelson Rockefeller. And Nelson Rockefeller is one of the shakers and movers of the elite, of the power elite. And what they wanted to do was to kind of like move a lot of the political power away from the president and move it more into these nebulous committees. And so one of the things Rockefeller did was come up with a set of recommendations for the reorganization of government. And the end result of that was that the National Security Council was reformed. There was a kind of cover organization within the National Security Council called, I think, what was the name of that group? It was an organization that was explicitly set up to deal with covert operations, but it was running the whole extraterrestrial projects, and it had a lot of power. And so Eisenhower was convinced that this was the sensible thing to do, to kind of like give more power over to the National Security Council, to these committees that were being formed within it, and kind of like release a lot of the pressure on the executive branch to take care of the various issues, including the extraterrestrial issue. So he followed those recommendations. And because these were the people that helped get him in power, because the Republican Party had been out of power for 20 years. So they were desperate to get power back. And so they chose Eisenhower, got behind him, and really pushed him out there. And of course, a president has to focus not just on one issue. So the extraterrestrial issue, even though it was a really important issue, there were a lot of issues he had to focus on. So, his attention span is spread out pretty widely, and he has to rely on the experts around him to advise him on what are the best things to do. And that was the job of the Majestic 12 group. So the Majestic 12 group started to come up with recommendations. So one of the things that Eisenhower did want to do was he didn't want to go down this path of developing thermonuclear weapons. In 1953, the first year of his administration, he came up with a really bold initiative. It was called Atoms for Peace. And he wanted to actually turn over America's nuclear arsenal over to the United Nations and make sure that this was something that would be used for peaceful purposes. But the Soviet Union at that time was going through turmoil. Stalin had just died, so they couldn't really respond to his initiative, so they just kind of ignored it. And the administration in the US, they didn't want to have anything to do with it. Like the national security people, they wanted to develop thermonuclear weapons, but it shows that Eisenhower, his instinct was to do away with nuclear weapons or thermonuclear weapons and hand it over to the United Nations. So he was overruled on that one, or at least, if not overruled, at least that initiative got nowhere because the Russians ignored it. But then what happens in 1954, you have the first meeting at Edwards Air Force Base with these Nordic extraterrestrials, and they make it an explicit condition. They say, look, these thermonuclear weapons are destructive, not only for your planet, but they're also very destructive for us. They impact life in the wider galaxy. And so you need to stop that. And I think Eisenhower, he'd already had shown that he was, inclined towards surrendering or not going down that path. But the elite had tried to lock him in. Like in 1952, just before the 1952 election, when he was elected, Truman organized the first test of a hydrogen bomb. That was the I think the Ivy Mike test in that was November 1st, 1952, like 3 or 4 days before the election that Eisenhower would win. And so you have to ask yourself, well, why would an outgoing president 3 or 4 days before his successor is elected, why would he authorize the testing of the world's first thermonuclear weapon? It was because they wanted to lock it in, because they knew that an incoming president, someone like Eisenhower, would likely be someone that might say, stop, don't do that. So they wanted to lock it in, because once you tested it, the cat's out of the bag. The Russians, the Chinese all see you're testing thermonuclear weapons. So now, they're going to do their own. So it kind of locks you into a path that you can't back out of. So that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to railroad Eisenhower into this development of thermonuclear weapons. And so by 1954, the ETs, he meets the ETs, and they say, look, you got to stop these thermonuclear weapons. So Eisenhower's already been kind of locked into this path. He can't say no, because his advisors say, look, it'd be madness to say no, because if you say no, then the Soviets are going to develop them regardless of what we say, and we'll be defenseless against the Soviets. So you got to do this. So that kind of locked him in. And so the other thing they did was they also said to him, look, you need to take away all of these R&D projects out of the hands of the Air Force, and put it into we'll put it into a more secure location, because all of the artifacts, all the flying saucer artifacts that they were studying and developing, they were all taken to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for study by the Air Force's premier foreign technology specialists. That's where things were taken, and that had happened under Roosevelt and Truman. That they'd set up the process that Wright-Patterson would be the premier US research facility for studying retrieved flying saucer craft. So that was it. Even though the Navy was doing its stuff at China Lake, the premier research facility was Wright-Patterson. Well, so then what happened was that the Majestic 12 group told Eisenhower, look, Wright-Patterson, it's not the right place. You really need to have a new facility, and this new facility we found in the remote region of Nevada. We're going to call it Area 51. It's going to be under the control of the CIA. The CIA will provide security. Lockheed's Skunk Works will be the lead corporate contractor for studying and reverse engineering these technologies, and the Air Force and the Navy would kind of provide personnel and scientists and so forth. But effectively what happened was that it moved the power away from the Air Force, and because the Air Force is under the direct control of the Commander-in-Chief, which was Eisenhower, it moved it away from that. All of these projects were moved into Area 51 and the S4 facility, and that was under the control of the CIA. So it took it out of the hands of the military, or the direct authority of the president. Now it was under the authority of the CIA, and that's when things started to go all right, because the CIA would do all these studies, and they wouldn't brief the president. Now, in the meantime, in 1955, you have the second of the meetings. There were several meetings, but the second of the meetings that happened at Holloman Air Force Base, and that's when Eisenhower got to meet with a delegation of, whether they were just extraterrestrials, whether they were from Orion, whether they were a combination of Orion and or with Nazis from Antarctica. There's a lot of evidence saying one or the other. But nevertheless, Eisenhower goes to Holloman Air Force Base in 55. He goes inside of one of the flying saucers that lands. There were 3 of them that showed up. 1 landed. He goes inside. There were multiple witnesses, and apparently that's when the first deal was done, the Greada Treaty. And this was not with the positive Nordics, or the I think that probably was maybe the Galactic Federation. Maybe Elena, later you can say that first group, whether that was the Galactic Federation of Worlds or another federation, we don't know. But definitely in 1955 at Holloman, he meets another group, an agreement is signed, and then the whole thing starts moving. Now, who signed that agreement? I mean, that's really interesting. I mean, Eisenhower went in there and he met the extraterrestrials. I don't think that would have been the scene for a formal signing. You would need to have a kind of different arrangement. So probably he went there to kind of like look or speak to the extraterrestrials, get a sense of what they offered, what they wanted in return, and then a deal would be struck. And so a deal was struck. Now, whether Eisenhower signed it or it was done under the authority of the Majestic 12 group, that's a really interesting question. So this is all stuff that I've known for a few years, and I've written about it in my books, several books. One, the US Air Force Secret Space Program, I talk about the different meetings and Eisenhower's role. But just a month ago, there was this new information that came from Courtney Brown, where he did he had these multiple remote viewers coming up with intel about the meetings themselves and what happened. And those meetings definitely, the remote viewers, what they saw about the meetings, they definitely were saying that, yes, Eisenhower was betrayed. He felt let down, that people he trusted took advantage of him, and these agreements were really, really bad. So, I can talk more about that later, but that's just a kind of an overview of what happened with Eisenhower.
Yeah, gosh. Can I just add something to that, Elena?
Of course.
I have this thing it's called the Freedom Articles, and it says things were out of control, and Eisenhower wanted to find out who these Black military groups were and what they were doing. When Eisenhower contacted them, MJ-12 replied that they were outside the jurisdiction of the White House and that their material was classified on a need-to-know basis, which went above the presidency. This apparently infuriated Eisenhower, who sent 2 CIA agents to tell the head of MJ-12 to report to him within a week, or else he would take the First Army from Colorado and invade Area 51 and S4. Eisenhower actually threatened to invade Area 51 if these rogue military operatives would not surrender control of the UFO and ET issue. So very much in tandem with what Michael's saying, this like loss of control. And when we look at all the different levels of the secret space programs, I mean, and Michael puts out more material and research than probably anybody in regards to that. There's 10 or more levels of these secret space programs. And then you got your service to self and service to others, kind of ETs, those that are here to help benefit us as a humanity, and those that wish to harvest us and use us. And when we look at what's rolling out currently with the jab and all the stuff, the code, what? I know it's like code words. This is, to me, a part of this greater New World Order agenda that has to do with the reptilians and the Greys that confused his administration. And I think, even on a level of if he was directly involved, there was this sort of plea to help save their dying race. That had a lot to do with, we need to get genetic material. We need to abduct. We need to somehow gain genetic material that we've lost. So that makes one wonder, when one talks about genetically modifying humans, are they future Greys? Because many, including like Dan Bursch and even Bob Lazar, have talked about future humans that are like appearing to look like gray ETs or EBEs, are actually time traveling back to make agreements to restore their dying race, which is like maybe us as humans that made grave errors and mistakes, including like probably getting the jab or somehow surviving, something that rendered us unable to reproduce and began to, turn our bodies into, this maybe gray alien. And so it brings up all those kind of things, and the whole concept of like P45s and P52s, 45,000 years into the future on this particular timeline is this particular race of Greys. And then you got your P52s, which are 52,000 years later, which are more benevolent because they've been able to sort of reintegrate their soul matrix and reclaim what they lost through abductions. That, it makes one wonder. And Elena, you can speak to this because you experienced an abduction more than once in childhood, and then had Pleiadians and your relationship with Thor Han, come in and it just seems very much like those that are interacting closely with Earth have interacted, with our governments. Some for the malevolent feeding of the 1% and the elites and the deep state sort of ritualistic harvesting of loosh and adrenochrome and child trafficking, stuff like that. And then, this more benevolent one that, is wanting to spiritually support us without saving us and helping us to, in a sense, sort of figure it out for ourselves, but we're not totally alone in it. Like they're there, and there's a positive military aspect that includes them, that the Greater Galactic Federation of Worlds is somewhat in contact with us on a human scale, right? And you're in contact, and here you are in the human realm, and you're connected to, the Tuatha De Danaan and the Egyptian culture, and, a very high vibration goddess energy that has had these incredible experiences. So I'll be quiet. And, any thoughts though?
Well, Laura, I believe that there are many different groups involved, and especially many different group of greys, two different group, benevolent and malevolent. There are benevolent gray looking like ETs at my knowing, who are part of a council called Council of Five, who are trying to help humanity and repair DNA, who do abductions as well, but they're very nice, and they will never torture or scare or threaten anyone. Those who perform this horrible abduction, I am an abductee. I have been abducted as a kid, and what they did on me, it's unnameable. So I could have never, if people who have told me, oh, that's humans transformed from the future, more evolved humans who come to redo manipulations, I would never believe it, because the coldness and the horrible way of doing things, it's inhuman. It's not, you can't do that when you have a proper soul. That's horrible to do that to children. What I have been told by my contacts is that the group that signs the Greada Treaty were Greys from Orion. They call themselves the Nebu, and they also trade with a reptilian empire, the Sikaar, and who plugged on it afterwards. They plugged on it, that this Greada Treaty. Now, I've got this little bit of information by Thorhan, my rescuer, for those who don't know. But I had more information, and that's why I contacted Laura. I'm going to tell my little humble bit I know now, because I've had contact with Valthor, Commander Valthor, called Valiant Thor. Valiant being a name invented to say brave, but it's Valthor. And I had 3 contacts with this man. I was very privileged and grateful. And I asked him about that. So what he said to me basically was that Eisenhower was betrayed. That the Greys from Orion, the Alliance of the Six, they do that on every world. They pretend they are a dying race. They send the little one, the Solipsirae, or the Zeta Reticuli, saying, oh, we are a dying race. We would need some genetic material to revive a little bit our genome. And in exchange, we give technology. But that's a joke. That's how they get people, and we are going to find greedy governments or leaders who are hungry for power and technology for war, and they know how to find them. So Valthor told me that the Orion Nebu Greys went first to ask the Nazis. And the Nazis say, no, we already have a deal with another group. And I wasn't told. Probably Michael knows more about that. So they went to ask Russia and America, and Russia, they were very like, that, not very warm about that. And so the they don't, they're very, very, and not trusty of anything that comes and say, oh, we give you protection. Wait a minute. So they went to see the American government, and they first made contact before 1954, and that would match with what you were saying, Laura, to start to say, oh, we are a dying race, blah blah blah, can we do abductions, blah blah blah. And I haven't been told that any agreements were made at that moment, but the Galactic Federation of Worlds and the Council of Five, respecting the law of free will, they said, oh, we need to give these humans a choice and warn them, because all go by free will. These Greys from Orion, or these reptilians, they could have come and invade Earth and take everyone and eat everyone and do whatever they want. If they had done so, because they can, they would have been in trouble, because they would have broken a law of non-intervention and the law of free will. So they do that on every world. They get the local population to agree to be invaded and to sign, yes, we want to be invaded. We give you facilities and we give you people. We agree that. Then the Galactic Federation cannot do anything. The people of Earth had agreed officially, the officials. So that's how they do on every world. So what Valthor told me, that the Galactic Federation sent a delegation, the Council of Five as well. So there were two delegations of good people. There were Nordic type aliens. That was the Galactic Federation. And Eisenhower went in their ship. They tried to convince him, and he wanted to sign protection with them. So what Valthor told me that he was betrayed. He said 12 men, 12 powerful men. So that's when I said that to Laura, we said, oh, that was the NJ-12 probably. 12 powerful men signed behind Eisenhower's back with the Orion Nebu Greys, because on one side the Federation was saying, oh, we give you disarmament of all your nuclear weapons, we give you technology, medical technology, and when you have peace and love, and the other side you have war technology and machines. Well, they took that. It was the time there was Cold War with Russia. Oh yeah, and they were doomed, and we were all doomed. Valthor told me that last point, that Eisenhower, he said he was a remarkable man and he loved his children, and his love for his children was something very powerful that moved him. And he said because he loved his children so much, he didn't want all the children of the world to suffer, and especially not his children and grandchildren, especially his grandchildren, remember. And that was the main motivation, his grandchildren, and he transposed this, oh no, I don't want all the children of the world to suffer. And Valthor helped him to try to get these agreement rescinded, but it didn't work. And if the Federation had insisted, that would have declared a war against the Greys, and they didn't want to transform Earth into a battlefield. So that's the story I was told. Michael, what do you think about that? How does it resonate?
That's good. That actually helps clarify the historical sequence, because we have to go to the 1930s when Hitler reached an agreement with the Reptilian Empire, and the reptilians helped Nazi Germany develop their bases in Antarctica, and then develop a secret space program that would be based out of Antarctica and supply troops and resources for the Dark Fleet that would fight alongside the reptilians in their interstellar war. So the reptilians got what they wanted in that regard, and then maneuvered for the US to get involved. Now, of course, then so the first important agreements were between the Reptilian Empire and Nazi Germany, essentially. But the Nazis didn't lose the war. They just fled to Antarctica and continued operations with the help of the reptilians, and defeated Operation High Jump. So then we move to 1954. The Galactic Federation of Worlds make official contact with Eisenhower. He's interested in doing something with them, but he's overruled by the Majestic 12 group. The Majestic 12 group basically mislead Eisenhower and get him to kind of like give the go-ahead, or at least allow this other group, the Orion Gray extraterrestrials, to come along, and then an agreement is signed. Now, it sounds like, and it makes a lot of sense from what Elena said, that the agreement was actually signed by the Majestic 12 group, because that actually does make a lot of sense, because that would explain why it was that Eisenhower was so enraged by 1958 that he would threaten to invade Area 51 with the First Army from Colorado, because he was just out of the loop, and that is suggesting that decisions were being made without his authorization. And part of and as I said at the beginning, part of the reorganization of the National Security Council was that the Majestic 12 group would get a lot more power in the national security system to run the whole ET program, and presumably briefing Eisenhower along the way, but we know they didn't do that. So it makes a lot of sense that an agreement was reached, and that the agreement itself was phrased or worded in a way that made it look like, well, we're going to get technology from them, from the Orion Grays. We're going to get technology from them, and in exchange, we're going to give them some base rights, some leasing rights. And so, they established a base at places like Nellis Air Force Base. The tall whites that Charles Hall has talked about, that sounds like they were these Orion Grays. And also the Orions or the Greys would take exactly what you're saying, Elena, that they would take some people up for genetic experimentation to help them with their genetic revitalization program, and then return the people unharmed. But it was kind of worded in that way to make it look like it would be monitored closely. People would be returned unharmed. They wouldn't have any memory of it. So to kind of make it look so that Eisenhower could be told that, well, look, these agreements are harmless. For just for a few dozen people being abducted, we get all of this. So, maybe that's how they tricked Eisenhower, to make him think that it was just going to be very, very limited and highly monitored. But in fact, they began abducting thousands of people very quickly, and it's grown ever since that time.
Yeah, totally. And apparently, it started before him, and that the Greada Treaty is renewed every 10 years. So I don't know where it is to this day, but just real quick from Colonel Philip Corso, who was a former advisor to President Eisenhower's National Security Council, said that this deal was a Trojan horse. And quoting him saying this, he said, "These creatures weren't benevolent alien beings who had come to enlighten human beings. They were genetically altered, human automations, cloned biological entities who are actually wishing to harvest biological specimens on Earth for their own experimentation." And he says, we had negotiated a kind of surrender with them as long as we couldn't fight them because of the level of technology that they had. So, it's so complicated when one looks at, what is the barter? It's human life force, this level of enslavement, from what I've learned, the treaties have to do with bartering exchanges of planetary goods, natural resources, elements and compounds and materials that can be taken off planet. And that included supplying numbers of human adults and children that the government agreed to barter exchanges for: abduction, work camps, sexual slavery, forced breeding, genetic experimentation, genetic augmentation, and secret space programs. So when you hear certain people's stories where they're like, oh, I was trafficked to these billionaire parties, but I was also a part of the secret space program, there is a connection with the deep state global elite and a lot of the leaders that are wishing to run the show on the planet right now, that have a connection with these off-world beings that are participating in this enslavement agenda, child trafficking, pedophilia, going off planet and being enslaved to just benefit this very selfish group of people. I mean, I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts of what I just shared? I mean,
Yes, th- those who signed these agreements, they didn't have a good intention at the start. They really, of course, they really thought, oh yeah, we're going to get technology we're going to use to make our weapons more efficient, how to build this new maybe spaceship and stuff like that. They saw that and they said, okay, we'll consent to give some people in exchange that will be returned. I think they didn't picture really, although if that what they did was bad, not ethical, I think they didn't really picture what was hiding behind that. They didn't know. Well, the Galactic Federation tried to warn them, but I think they didn't want to know that. But I think they didn't expect all the amount of abduction and everything that just plugged onto it. It was exactly a Trojan horse, is exactly the expression. And when we speak about, oh, there's going to be a disclosure, the government will never disclose this, that how they signed on behalf of humanity, with the blood of humanity, you know. Yeah, I think I believe Eisenhower was betrayed, and Valthor said he was in prison in his own government. He was tied up. He couldn't do whatever he wanted, and that's what he said. So
yeah, and when Valthor was put in VIP status at the Pentagon for 3 years, I mean, they formed,
yes.
a friendship, and didn't Eisenhower try and assist in this greater kind of hope for humanity that the shadow government, shut down, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the whoever advisors, that I feel his warning of the military-industrial complex was about these characters that he was realizing were not on his side and that were totally playing him. And it's so unfortunate because, somebody with good intent that gets betrayed and played is making grave decisions that, we're impacted by. And I know that it broke his heart, and he's been struggling with it even beyond his physical incarnation here. You mentioned some of that Valthor and him were friends.
Valthor and him became friends, yes. Michael, want to say something?
Yeah, I think it's really important that we kind of identify that when Valiant Thor showed up, I think he was there at the White House from 1958 to 1961. These were the formative years of the NASA program. NASA was set up as well, beginning of 1958. So what's the coincidence that Valthor shows up as NASA is being created and tries to encourage the Eisenhower administration to take a different path? Because when we look at the NASA program, and I've written about this in a couple of the books, it was really run by the Germans out of Antarctica. The NASA program, you had Werner von Braun, who was running the Marshall Space Flight Center, which was basically setting up the entire Apollo program. And then you had Dr. Kurt Debus at the Kennedy Space Center, being in charge of the launches. So what are the chances that two Nazis that were part of the V2 program, that were both SS officers, are running the Apollo program? Well, the Apollo program was a cover. It was a cover because there were billions of dollars going to the Apollo program, but behind the scenes there were billions more being funneled through the Apollo program to the Antarctic Germans, so that they could build up their fleets and their bases on Mars, the Moon, and elsewhere in the solar system, outside of our solar system. So, one of the quotes I've come up with is that while Apollo got Americans to the Moon, it got the Germans to the Mars and Alpha Centauri, and that's essentially what happened. So you actually have two things happening here. Two sets of agreements or understandings. One was the set of agreements with the Antarctic Germans through the Apollo program, where all of this money would go down to Antarctica to fund their program down there. A lot of American servicemen would go down there and be part of their program. A lot of scientists and corporations would also be a part of that. And so you started to have the development of these 20 and back service programs where people would serve with the Dark Fleet. You'd have Marines, special operators working for the Dark Fleet, doing these 20 and backs, and then they would basically come back and they would continue to serve. And on the other hand, you had the Orion Grey groups that had reached agreements with the MJ12 group, and they were doing the abductions, they were handing over some technologies, but it was always very limited. So both the Germans and the reptilians were kind of like manipulating the American government under Eisenhower to kind of like get what they needed for their program, and you had the Orion Greys also manipulating the Eisenhower government to get what they wanted, which was people, resources, and all the time trying to compromise the government and get them involved in all of these really dark, nebulous activities.
Oh, isn't it so interesting, though? I mean, I would love to talk about where we are here and now, you know, with the jab, with this next level of you know, human enslavement. But I have to ask both of you, I don't know how much you know about this. A lot of attention has been brought to me by people that Eisenhower was responsible for the genocide of millions of Germans. They don't have the history correct when they call him a Swedish Jew, and I guess they called him that at West Point. And whether he is or not, you know, it doesn't matter. But no, we're a German family, and his background is Anabaptist that, you know, formed the Mennonites and colonized Pennsylvania. So, you know, there's so much misinformation. And Richard Bach, or not Richard Bach, that's the spiritual dude. Somebody else with the last name Bach, Baque, wrote a book literally saying that, you know, Eisenhower is responsible for this horrific, you know, genocide. And I've got people messaging me, your great grandfather's a monster. And, you know, like literally, like, I mean, the attacks are so severe when it comes to that. I, you know, ended up putting together a presentation about some of the things that were policies and just, you know, trying to exonerate him, but not out of the biasness because I'm related to him. I just feel like he's spiritual family. Like we all are spiritual family, like both of you to me in my heart, that it's a greater responsibility to the collective. It's not just, oh, because I'm related to him, you know, I have to make sure that, but it's like part of my mission and responsibility to protect his legacy, because I can't imagine that, you know, I don't see him as a monster, and we're dealing with brutality of wartime, and the rations that weren't able to get to the prisoners of war, you know, ended up going to displaced families. And I just feel like I'm trying to rescue his legacy for the bigger picture reasons, not for family biasness or, you know, because it's all on one person. I mean, he has got amazing quotes that's just like, you know, none of this should be on one person. The whole system of government. He's like, one of my favorite quotes of him is, the governments better get out of the way and let people have peace. It's the governments that are the problem, you know? I mean, he's very much understanding of like star seeds and different people's missions, and that it's not all on one person, and really wanted to take down that template or old paradigm structure. And there's a lot of quotes there. So I'll be quiet, but I don't know if you guys got any information or research about this projection that he's like behind the genocide of millions of Germans and starved them at war camps. Or if you guys want to say anything about that. I hope I didn't take things way off topic bringing it up, but.
Oh,
it's not off topic. I think there's a very good explanation for what happened, because I think those authors, they mix up two different things. That there were hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of missing German soldiers after the war. And it's like, well, what happened to them? And so, you know, the disinformation that's put out there is that, well, you know, they were killed by Eisenhower's army that massacred the Germans. Well, no, actually, what happened was that those Germans were taken down to Antarctica. Because if you're building a colony in Antarctica, that it's going to be the hub for this German-dominated space civilization, you need a lot of manpower. And at that time, in the 40s, there were no agreements with the Americans. There was no agreements at all. So you needed to get as many German men as possible. So they were abducting German soldiers or taking them somehow, siphoning them out of Germany, and coming up with these with the cover story. Well, they were killed in the concentration camps that were organized by Eisenhower. So you do two brilliant things there. One is you get the manpower you need for your German Antarctic space program. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of young German men that are ready to establish this colony. But you also begin this disinformation campaign to make it look like the Allied powers, which won the war in Europe, were monsters. They were massacring all these German men that were disappearing. People are saying, where did they go? So I think there's a good answer to that. That is, that these German men did disappear. They weren't massacred by Eisenhower. In fact, they were secreted out of Nazi Germany or occupied Germany and taken to Antarctica as part of this Odessa program. The Odessa program, to siphon out all of these high-level Nazi SS officials. That it was much bigger, much more successful. That the Fourth Reich wanted German manpower, and that's how they did it.
Okay, that's
so interesting.
Go on, Laura.
There's something about, though, not one race is all good or all bad, just like humans. Not all reptilians are evil, and our concept of evil is, are they trying to screw us over? Are they using us, abusing us, and manipulating us? But, when we look at the Vril Society and the Nordics and their connection with, Hitler and some of the eugenics programs, connected to the Aryan race and the whole fucking Nazi movement, what are you guys' thoughts on sort of the benevolent Nordics and maybe Nordics that are a part of maybe hybridized human plans to, be the master race and wipe out the undesirables? That's one of the pieces of all this that I'm still trying to figure out. I don't know if you guys mind telling me your thoughts on it. In the Palladium.
Michael and I have made a video recently about to clear up a bit all this entangled thing about all the humanoid races who are the Nordics, for instance. There are so many types of extraterrestrials that we call Nordics. They have different agendas, they come from different places. There's a lot of Nordics type humanoids in the Galactic Federation acting for the greater good of humanity, but there are also humanoid coming from star system like Altair or Alcyone in the Pleiades or Aldebaran, who are working with either the Nazis, either dark shadow governments. It's like the Greys. Of course, there are many different types of Greys. The ones from Orion who signed with the MJ12 and probably involving darker, deeper structures were malevolent and are malevolent. And those are those who are involved in Area 51, for instance, and all the underground bases. The main despicable species who really are filled with hate. And well, people who have met them, I haven't met them personally. Thorhan described them to me, but Stephen Chow, the whistleblower from Area 51 that I interviewed, met and had interaction with these Greys. Some were even called tall whites in Area 51, and they were not acting very benevolently. These ones, they have no compassions. They have no compassions for humanity, and they come here to do a job, to collect genetic material, to conduct experiments, and to trade this genetic material. and with different other groups, and reptilians are one of the groups they deal with. So there are different, it's not all the Nordics are good, the Greys are bad. No, there are so many different origins and agendas.
And it seems to be part of our greater evolution too, in the way that we have our higher aspects, we have our negative ego, and we feed into the cabal and the deep state agendas unconsciously. Very often through psychological operations and Mockingbird media. People don't realize that they're literally feeding this darker system. So, like, what are your guys' thoughts on like where we are today, and the fact that a huge portion of humanity is awoken, but those that haven't are unwilling participants to this greater sort of satanic ritual? I mean, like, you know what I mean? Or Michael, what are your thoughts? We were talking about the Nordics and like, and just where we are today, because I think people are just so lost and confused. Like, what is this? And it seems connected to everything that we're talking about, and we're seeing a manifestation of where they wanted to take these agendas or treaties, or that the deep state, the shadow government, MJ12, their connection with these off-planet beings, or in underground bases and subterranean cultures, that we're seeing a rollout of the next level of human harvesting and enslavement. I mean, like, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, there's definitely an awakening happening now. I mean, we have a lot of people that are looking for answers to questions. A lot of people, probably an unprecedented number of people, have been red-pilled over the last 12 months because of all of the events, especially in the United States, and with that letter of the alphabet that's very controversial, that movement, that a lot of people have been red-pilled, and they're asking questions. They're looking for answers now, and this is still a little out on the fringe for a lot of people. A lot of the people that are kind of part of this more mainstream patriot, let's get out and regain control of the republic. That movement is still very skeptical about this, but nevertheless, this is something that is going to be thrust into the people's consciousness really, really quickly, and people are going to have to really start to expand their mind and deal with these larger issues. That it's not just a matter of like, okay, well, today a lot of people, especially on the political left, they're fixated on issues of race, gender, and identity, and thinking, well, we have to atone for historic racism and slavery and all of that. It's like, yeah, well, of course we need to do that, but we can't blinker ourselves to the slavery that's happening right now. I mean, you look at it in the 300 years of slavery from the Americas to the United States, or to from Africa to the Americas. 11 million people were taken from Africa over a matter of like 3 centuries. 11 million. Okay, that's a lot of people, and of course we have the descendants of those now. But right now you have more than 1 million people being taken annually every year as part of a galactic slave trade. So we're talking hundreds of millions of people in this century alone, that, or latter part of the 20th century and early part of the 21st century, that have been caught up in this galactic slave trade, and no one knows anything about it. No one is dealing with it. It's all done secretly per these agreements that go back, of course, to the Eisenhower administration. That's well, that's actually goes, to be fair, it goes back to the German Dark Fleet, because I think that's when it was all set up. I mean, Germany, actually this was part of Hitler's plans, that a post-war Germany would become a slave empire. One of the person who was the armaments minister for Germany during the Second World War, he wrote a book called Infiltration, and he revealed that in this book, Germany envisaged that after it had won the Second World War, it would have continued a slave empire, would have created this, and used slaves from all over the planet to to kind of like make sure that their industries were manned sufficiently to produce everything that they needed. So they were planning for this slave empire, the Third Reich. Well, the Third Reich was defeated, but the Fourth Reich was born, and the Fourth Reich was born on slavery. So they established it in Antarctica. A lot of slaves were taken to Antarctica, exploited there, then taken off planet to Mars, and now they're being traded per these agreements that were reached through the Eisenhower administration. So the Eisenhower administration basically brought in the Orion Empire, but the slavery was going on with the reptilians out of Antarctica before that. So you have slavery under the Germans out of Antarctica. They set it up. It's a slave trade. They're being forced to, work all over our solar system. And then in the 50s, you have the Orion Greys signing the agreements with the Eisenhower administration, and so the whole thing accelerates. So yeah, this has been going on now for over 70 years. 70 years we've had slave trade continuing from our planet, and no one talks about it.
I know.
And this is the tragedy.
Yeah. And grateful that we're talking about it. And I couldn't be more thrilled to be with like two of my most favorite people and talking about this. And I would love to do more of this kind of thing. But like, I got to ask you guys, and Elena, I'm sorry if I'm like, posing questions to everybody. And I know you're hosting this, but when we look at the whole concept of human slavery and the manipulation of our DNA, Anunnaki, those who came from whatever, and exploded planets, Tiamat, Maldek, and the refugees that came here, and like the whole Anunnaki thing. I mean, do you feel that it's part of that manifestation of this artificial timeline of, fooling humans and manipulating them? They can't like really steal something that we innately have within us. It's just the trickery, right? It's like being in a relationship. It's like, you're drained of your life force if it's not harmonious and you're dealing with an abuser, but you can call that energy back. I mean, back to the rightful owner, but it seems like it's rooted in Anunnaki. I mean, what are your guys' thoughts? Like the Anunnaki piece, Enki and Enlil, and, junk DNA and the Sumerian and Egyptian wars. And, when we lost our galactic memories and started being born with amnesia, and the planetary grid network being messed with as well. I mean, is that Anunnaki? And what is Anunnaki? What does that mean to you guys?
Well, I think Anunnaki were one group, and there has been many groups interfering in our evolution and our genome. And what Michael said, that confirms that what Valthor said to me, that the Orion Greys went first to see Germany, and the Germans say, no, thank you, we already have agreements with another group. That was the reptilians, of course. There's something that we do have that the Orion Greys, all these gray races don't have. It's the interdimensional capacity and potential of human soul. They don't have that, and they want to crack that, to have this ability to be more powerful and do more things. Not very good. So that's this as well. These experiments that are conducted in all these bases of what I am told, what I was told, is that all these facilities are being at the moment cleared. It's not over yet. There are still many places to clear, but it's in the process. The Earth military has allied with the Galactic Federation in something they call the Alliance, or the Earth Alliance, to clear to really try to kick out this grays. But that's their part of the job. But we have a part to do, is ourselves, to personally wake up by saying, I'm a sovereign being. I do not consent. I do not consent to be abducted. I do not consent to be enslaved and mind controlled by this gray technology. And there's something absolutely incredible. When I have told many abductees, because I'm contacted a lot by people who are abducted regularly by grays, And they shout for help. What can I do? It's difficult. I say, well, first try this, because what's worth for humanity? It's maybe you can do it for yourself. Try not to fear. I know they are scary when they beam into your room. They are super scary. Try to control the best as you can your fear, and then stand up to them and say, hey, I never consent for that. I do not consent. And I ask you to get out of my house and never come back, because I do not consent. What was amazing is that people get back to me and they say, oh my gosh, it worked. They turned back and they didn't take me and they went away. And what? Wow, the power of consent and non-consent. That's what has been done to humanity. So if more and more people wake up and say, we are a sovereign race, we do not consent, that will take their power away. And spreading the truth, so telling what really happened and happens. I think this, personally, this situation is slowly getting sorted. So we still have our part of the job to do.
Right. And we can override, all this weirdness. And it seems like it's preying upon unconsciousness. As long as there's amnesia and we're not getting the real facts, we're indoctrinated in the school systems, and the universities are, pushing these narratives, and the media, the news, and, it's a psychological war. It's a war on consciousness. And what are your thoughts, Michael, like based on what we've just been sharing, whether you want to go into the Anunnaki or just like, this war on consciousness? It's like, we can regain our freaking power. We can fill in the blanks of what's unconscious by doing the inner work, like, wow, what a radical idea. But anyway, any thoughts you want to share?
Yeah, I think, people are being gaslit to go into these areas that generate conflict. Everyone's being pushed into wedge areas, like, if you're on the political right, you talk about God, country, and family. If you're on the political left, you talk about gender, race, and identity, and you look at each other as like enemies, and so you fight and throw insults and not cooperate, and that's all by design. That's been set up, by these powers that are very used to manipulating humanity for a long time, and they're just playing us. They're just playing the political left and political right against each other, because both sides are part of the picture. Undoubtedly, there's both sides have merit. But the thing is, if you look at people on the political left or the political right, they're taught that the other side are idiots. They have nothing to offer, and because we live in a majoritarian democracy, we're used to the idea, well, if you get 50.1% of the vote, then you have all the power and the other side has nothing, and you can ignore them. Well, that's nonsense. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, a majoritarian democratic political system is doomed to collapse if you persist in that way. And we're seeing that now in the United States. If the US continues to go this way of just having this majoritarian ethos where whether you're political left or political right, when you come in you have all the power and you ignore the other side, then the US is headed for oblivion. And who's going to be the big beneficiary of this? It's going to be China. And China's a totalitarian state, even though it has all of the the technological gadgets, and it makes it appear as though it's a kind of flourishing, progressive place to be. In fact, it's a stifling political environment. If you say anything wrong, the social credit system there is such that you can such basic things as getting on a bus or on a train or on a plane, you're denied from doing that. And we don't want to go down there. So we really need to get our act together. And I think that this exopolitical arena is where we can go beyond this divisive political arena that's been set up to kind of manipulate us against one another and get us shouting at each other rather than talking with each other. If we start revealing these these truths about what happened in with the Germans and the reptilians, during the war, and then what happened during the Eisenhower administration with the Orion Empire, and then the agreements with the Germans that set up the Apollo program and the secret space programs, all of these things, and the galactic slave trade, all of these things are going to unite people, because they're going to be like, wow, this has been going on, and they're going to get out of their left-right blinkered mindset and start cooperating on the big issues that really need to be resolved.
Oh my God, so beautiful. But like it's a total deprogramming, right? And getting back to center. Elena, I have to tell you, Michael Salla and I, we walked the Great Wall of China together, and he was like, you were like so far ahead of us. We're all like, oh, like out of shape. And like we're like, we're trying to catch up. So John D'Souza, Michael Salla, and I, we had an incredible 2-week journey in China, and I just reminiscing a little bit. I'll shut up. It was fun.
No, I think what Michael is saying is absolutely really wonderful and motivating. And it's the more we know about these things, the more we're motivated to raise and in power, in sovereignty, in frequency. That always, I will always say that the more we know, and the knowledge doesn't come from the government. It won't come from the government. Everybody's waiting. Oh wait, you're gonna have some disclosure. Oh great. You're going to have crumbs to make people happy, but the real disclosure, it comes from people who do researches and people who have contacts and experiences, and the people are the disclosure. People are the disclosure. Yeah.
I know, like us realizing who we truly are and getting out of the matrix web that is reversal codes of, putting us in fear, wanting to mask us. It's like, this is an ascension window period. Like, where's everybody's intuition? Like, we totally got this. We can alchemize and transmute anything. I mean, we're moving into the next level of human potential and advancement. And it's very weird to see everybody wearing a fucking muzzle. Sorry, I said the F word, but you know what I mean? Like, it's literally the psychological operation is fear death, because if you fear death, you can't transform. How many times do we die in this physical vessel when we're born? We have to be comfortable with that, and they're leveraging. And I love what you said, Michael. It just really pinpoints the psychological operations of like the triggers of like past traumas of on a global scale. But what do you? I could talk to you guys forever. Like, I really don't want to get off the call, and I know we probably need to go. But I mean,
well, I have a question for Elena.
Of it all, like,
yeah. So I have a question for Elena.
Yes, Michael. Yes.
So, from the perspective of the Galactic Federation of Worlds, I mean, they look at us and they say, well, your planet, your leaders negotiated these agreements with the Orion Greys and with the reptilians, and they've kept it all secret. So, we can't intervene other than do these kind of like covert operations behind the scenes. So how, what would be the best way to negate those agreements? Would it be just people becoming awake and aware and saying, we don't agree to these agreements that have been secretly signed by elites behind our backs, we don't accept them? Or how from the Galactic Federation of Worlds, how would they say that, how could they reach a point where they say, we now see that the people of Earth don't agree with these agreements, so the agreements are null and void?
Yes, I try to find, I have my notes of what Valthor said. Well, basically, what they wait for us is that we reconnect to our own power, because reconnecting with who we truly are is making us uncatchable, unreachable by these malevolent aliens. If we are aware of who we are, the thing is they have maintained us in ignorance, making us believe we were so miserable. What because we're talking about Valthor said to me, we cannot liberate a slave who holds on to his chain. And I'm trying to find that piece where he's talking about it, because it's very important. Where did I? He said, yeah. I couldn't find it for the moment.
If I can just insert this, like this whole jab thing, it seems like this is like the ultimate way to modify, humans and compromise DNA, and the whole mark of the beast thing. Like, is anything that you're getting from your transmissions or contacts saying, oh no, we can correct this and reverse the damage of these detrimental decisions people are making? If you guys don't mind me bringing that up, it's like
this is what he said to me. Giving into fear, frustration, or doubt, considering yourself as inferior beings, is putting yourself in the position of a slave, and we cannot liberate a slave who holds on to its chains. If you require assistance to be freed from slavery, do not consider yourselves as such, neither to a religion, a political power, or even to us. Consider yourselves as evolved and powerful as all the members of the galactic community. Do not kneel, but stand up on your feet as equals. So what are they doing is that they are fighting with us. You have this Earth Alliance thing. To fight the technology that we are not able to fight with, to fight kick these bad ETs. But that's on another level, that because this war is on many levels. On the other levels, we have to do our job as well, which is to claim our sovereignty. So what he advised me to tell everyone is, I've been telling this, but that is quite important, to request assistance, because in 1954 and around this date, assistance has been offered to the people of Earth by the benevolent ETs who wanted to help us go forward. That has been refused. So we need now to say, hey, no, we, the people of Earth, request assistance to the Galactic Federation, or you can ask the Council of Five or the Andromeda Council, one of these benevolent. The Galactic Federation was those who offered assistance. It was refused. So if we request assistance, everyone individually, this is going to rescind the power of these agreements that have been done on our behalf. He advised to me to stand up, go outside, stand up, and claim, I am I, as a sovereign being, I request assistance to the Galactic Federation of Worlds as an equal. That is very important, because you rise as an equal and you get out of this, low jail. As an equal, I request assistance as a free human being, and I rescind the agreements that have been made on my behalf in the past with the Greys, and I stand as a free human being, part of the galactic community, requesting assistance. So the thing is that they are already assisting us, the Galactic Federation. That's not the point. That you request assistance or not won't change the work they do. But what it will change, it will free you, it will liberate you. So that's the same process when you got abducted and these Greys are coming to take us. Hey, I never consented for that. Go away. And there's this universal law of free will that really is the web and the structure of everything in the universe. And the benevolent and the malevolent ones, they go by this rule of free will. That's how all these agreements have been done for that.
Right. What do you guys thought, like the targeting though of children, that like, and you were in that situation, and Michael, you've been researching this and like drawing a lot of attention to all the different levels of this. I mean, isn't that almost like a part of like growing up? Like, you must have felt that hit this certain level of consciousness and maturity, and as a child, an innocent child that was being messed with, that it's like, wait a second, I dropped into this physical incarnation, and if I'm going to be born here, I mean, we need to like lay down the law like from the get-go, like because I mean, I have to joke that, you know, I was born a very sweet person, but I've learned to be like a major bitch. You know, it's like lay down the law. It's just crazy how, you know, our innocence and our good intent and seeing good in everybody, and, you know, thinking that things, you know, evil's over here, but, you know, everything is, that we have to stand our ground at such a young age, and you did. And do you feel like you know, like you're just your soul family, like Thorhan, like you're a representative of this particular ET group? Or I mean, like how do you like relate to all that? I don't know. I just could talk to you guys forever, and I should shut up. But
Well, I think yes, it's maybe time we say our
goodbyes.
Last conclusion. Or no, not yet goodbyes. There's maybe something we can offer to everyone who's listening to it, is our message for humankind and our kind, and our what we think of finally what really happened about these agreements. So, well, personally, from what I've been told, Eisenhower was fooled. He wanted to go with those who were had benevolent agendas for humanity, and he's been betrayed. And he's been trying to warn humanity when he left the presidency about who was really ruling this society. What he did with this speech about the MIC. It's never too late, and things are going towards a good timeline, and we have allies, and we're fighting together, and we need to do our part of the job, which is reclaiming our sovereignty. So what I think is that now we need to know that well, Eisenhower was simply deceived by his government, and is not the one to blame. The one to blame is all the dark agendas, the dark structure that are behind. So I would say that's my belief, my vision of it. And I would say, let us stand for our sovereignty, and that's the only way forward. Michael, what would be your vision?
Yeah, I would focus on, you know, these agreements, that there are multiple agreements that have been negotiated behind the scenes between elites, power groups such as Majestic 12, the ruling bloodline families, the Rockefellers, all of that, you know, the usual suspects, with different extraterrestrial groups. And, you know, there seem to be three main groups. There could be more, but the three main groups that are the Galactic Federation, the Reptilian Empire, and the Orion Collective, and that agreements have been signed with the Orion Collective and the Reptilian Empire, and the Galactic Federation are kind of like behind the scenes trying to warn us, raise awareness, so that we can kind of like get up to speed to what's going on. And so, you know, our job is to just really become aware that these agreements are real, that they were reached without our consent, without our knowledge, and that in these agreements we are commodities to be traded between different extraterrestrial groups and ruling elites, that they kind of like trade us. Depending on where you live, you could be traded and all of a sudden absorbed into one of these galactic slave trade routes. So this is one of the things that we need to wake up to, that this is going on, and until we say no, that we do not stand for this, then those agreements are going to continue. And so we need to just inform ourselves. More and more people need to be red-pilled about the agreements, about everything that's involved with those agreements, the slave trade, the technology exchange, the secrecy system that's set up. And when people know about this, they're all going to say the same thing. They're going to say, no way in the world am I going to consent to this. This is wrong. And that's when the agreements become null and void. But that's our challenge, and I think we're doing that by speaking out and sharing the truth.
Dang.
Yes.
Amazing.
Thank you, Michael. And Laura, what would be your vision and last word?
Yeah, well, to realize that we are living conduits of, ascension energies, but we have to consciously align with those energies instead of the AI, instead of the propaganda and the steered narratives and the things that like literally make us a conduit for the things that we don't want. We have to take more accountability to the things that are manifesting around us and understand this planetary consciousness. Like there's something so amazing about Mother Gaia and this earth and this greater galactic history connected to how we came into this scenario to be born on such a divine and sacred planet, and what's at stake is our own soul. And when we devote to staying connected with our soul and we don't give that up because of the mind control, because of the social engineering and the things that influence our self-esteem to make poor decisions because we're worried about what other people think or we want to fit in. No, stand brave, be sovereign, and realize that we're a replica of this greater picture. And yes, there's been dark technologies and reversals and all this kind of stuff, but really we have to decide within ourselves, like, how's that impacting me? And am I feeding it? Am I like buying into it? Am I a part of that? This reversal grid of just degradation of the human soul, to choose superficiality and lack of integrity to play the deceiver role, even if it's in a small way, and it's a far less evil than what we see with the deep state and the dark cabal and the ritualistic practices. We literally just need to create a greater relationship and say, I embrace true love. And it's not about finding that partner, that twin flame. It's the true love experience that we can have in every moment with creation and with this earth, this beautiful, diverse, abundant Mother Earth, and learn from her that diversity and harmony is oneness, and the web of life and the way ecosystems are supported have everything to do with being different, but it's not a problem. And even if there is death, there's no fear of death because we're multidimensional. So let's not be played by these, I want to say fuckers, and I'm just going to say it. No, it's like narcissistic, abusive partnerships that we need to have enough self-worth to say, I'm not participating in this game because they don't have any power except for the power they stole from us. So we need to call it back. And that's my final thought.
Thank you, Laura. And thank you, Michael. And thank you, Grandpapa Dwight, for having fought everything you could to try. We have your back wherever you are. And this girl there, she has your back, and we're gonna be good. We're gonna be good.
We're such a greater soul family. I feel really bad for him because he's been like a spirit guide. I'm like, I'm so sorry. No, and like he's like, you said like, he's proud of me and like this and that, but I never feel like I measure up. I don't feel worthy, and like I'm like, I have a terrible affliction of like self-criticism. And I know when we like end the call, I'm gonna be like, oh, I talked too much, or I did this, or it's like I want to just be in my breath and just like, just feel the love and be in the now. Because I swear to God, I do go into that monkey mind where I'm like totally like, do you guys do that too? Or
probably yes, not. But Laura, I think I'm going to just end this video by reading to you what Val Thor told me when I said to him in our set what he said for our last words about you. Laura, I met her once, but she didn't know it was me. I vowed to look after Dwight's descendants, and Laura is very special. She came to restore the truth. She needed to learn about the faces and the plans of the enemy, but I always protected her, all along, and so did Dwight until this day. Laura holds a guiding light which will be followed by many. Here we go.